Ethan Core had spent years alone on Myrath, a planet forgotten by trade routes and avoided by explorers because of its harsh climate and barren plains. The wind carried sand in swirling patterns across the empty landscape, while the sun beat down relentlessly during the day and the nights were cold and unforgiving. Despite the loneliness, Ethan found a rhythm to life here. The solitude gave him time to tinker, to repair old machines, and to explore the little that remained of the abandoned settlements scattered across the land. He had a small shelter made of salvaged metal sheets and stones, a place where he stored his tools and old electronics that he had collected over the years. Life was simple and predictable until the night that scanners in his workshop picked up a faint distress signal from the dunes beyond the ridge. The signal was weak but persistent. It was unusual to detect anything at all in this region, and Ethan felt a spark of curiosity mixed with caution. He prepared his equipment and set out toward the source, navigating the rough terrain with his all-terrain vehicle. As he climbed the ridge and peered down into the valley, he saw the outline of a ship half buried in the sand. Its design was unlike any human craft he had ever seen. Sleek, elegant, with symbols etched in silver along its hull. The ship looked ancient yet alive, with a subtle hum that vibrated through the ground. He approached carefully and found the pilot slumped beside the vessel. She was an elf woman named Leora. Her skin had a faint golden glow, and her eyes reflected intelligence and sorrow. She clutched a small creature in her arms, which at first looked like a dragon hatchling, but with scales of metal and wings of shimmering light. It was wounded, and Ethan could see the faint flicker of energy in its eyes that matched the hum from the ship. Despite his fear, Ethan approached and offered assistance. Leora studied him silently, her expression unreadable. Then she nodded and allowed him to examine the ship and tend to the dragon. Ethan worked through the night with Leora watching over him. She did not speak much, but occasionally guided his hands, pointing at panels or circuits that seemed alive to the touch. The ship responded to her presence, pulsing with light and emitting soft vibrations that seemed like a language of its own. As he worked, Ethan discovered that the ship was built with organic circuits and infused with energy, unlike anything he had ever encountered. He marveled at the complexity and beauty of the design, realizing that repairing it would require all his skill and ingenuity. During the breaks, he looked at Leora and Etherion, the dragon. The creature would watch him closely, its gaze intelligent and curious. It seemed to bond with Ethan, sensing his honesty and careful nature. He spoke softly to it, telling it that he meant no harm, and it would tilt its head as if understanding and trusting him more with each passing hour. Leora began to reveal fragments of her story. She had been fleeing a war that had consumed her world and shattered her people. The empire that hunted her sought the heart of Elindra, a crystal of unimaginable power, capable of awakening entire worlds. She had stolen nothing but carried knowledge that made her a target. The responsibility weighed heavily on her, and she carried the sorrow of a people whose homes had been destroyed. The night stretched on, and the twin moons of Myrath rose high in the sky, casting pale light over the desert. Ethan worked tirelessly, guided by instinct and by subtle hints from Leora. The ship began to respond to him, slowly flickering with life as connections he restored were repaired. The dragon remained near him, guarding the work area, and occasionally brushing against him with warm metal scales which gave him comfort in the cold night. Leora finally spoke at length, sharing more about the battles her people had endured and the powers they possessed. Described fleets that moved through the stars with grace and speed, and weapons that could tear apart entire planets. Her people were wise and powerful, yet vulnerable when scattered and hunted across the galaxy. Ethan listened with awe, realizing that the universe was far more complex than he had ever imagined on his lonely world. The dawn approached, and the first hints of sunlight painted the dunes in gold. Ethan wiped his hands and looked over the ship. It was still damaged, but the systems were stabilizing enough to attempt a short journey if necessary. Leora smiled faintly, the first sign of relief he had seen. Her dragon Etherion stirred and stretched its wings, the scales catching the sunlight and reflecting a spectrum of colors. Ethan felt a sense of accomplishment mixed with a nervous anticipation of what was to come. He had helped a stranger and in doing so had become part of something far larger than his own isolated existence. The wind blew softly, carrying grains of sand over the plains, and for a moment everything seemed calm. Ethan realized that this night had changed everything. His simple life on Myrath was now intertwined with an ancient conflict across the stars, and with beings whose power and grace exceeded his imagination. Yet he felt ready for whatever came next because he had acted with courage and kindness, and had earned the trust of Leora and Aetherion. Together they faced an uncertain future with the desert plains behind them and the stars ahead. After the first night of repair, the ship seemed to hum with a quiet energy like a living creature. Leora remained near Ethan, guiding him through the intricate circuits and glowing panels. Aetherion perched beside them, its wings folded carefully over its body, but eyes alert, scanning the surroundings for danger. The desert had grown strangely silent except for the soft hum of the ship and the wind brushing against the dunes. Ethan marveled at how alive the ship seemed to be responding to Leora, as if it recognized her as its rightful master. He studied the organic circuits, tracing their paths and connecting fragile conduits with care, following the instructions from Leora with precision. His hands grew sore, but he pushed forward. Driven by curiosity and responsibility, Leora spoke little, but when she did, her voice was melodic with a tone that seemed to resonate with the ship itself. She explained that the technology was a blend of magic and science that only her people had mastered, and it was difficult for any human to comprehend fully. Yet she trusted him enough to guide his hands and to allow him to assist with the restoration. Every night they worked together, Ethan found himself asking more about her people and the wars that had driven her from her home. Leora shared fragments of the history of the empire that had risen from the ashes of her world, seeking to control the heart of Elindra. She spoke of fleets that moved faster than light and weapons that could destroy cities with a thought. She explained that the heart was not merely a crystal, but a source of consciousness and energy that could awaken dormant worlds, and that her people had sworn to protect it from falling into the wrong hands. Aetherion would sometimes lean close to Ethan, sensing his emotions and pressing its head gently against him, giving reassurance during moments of tension. The dragon had an intelligence beyond measure, and seemed able to communicate in subtle ways. Telepathy and gestures combined in a language that Ethan slowly learned to understand. The nights on Myrath were long but productive. Each repair and adjustment to the ship was a small victory, and Ethan began to see the vessel not just as a machine, but as a living entity. The soft lights pulsing along its hull reflected in Leora's eyes, and in the metal scales of Aetherion, creating a scene of beauty and harmony amid the harsh desert. Leora's gratitude was quiet but evident in the way she moved around the ship, allowing Ethan to work while standing guard during the cold nights. She shared stories of her training her people, and the deep connection between the elven guardians and their dragons. These bonds were not only physical, but spiritual, and Ethan could see the depth of it in the way Aetherion responded to her commands and to his presence. He realized that the dragon had chosen him as a friend and ally in this desperate time. During the day, Ethan explored the surrounding dunes, searching for materials that could aid in the repairs. He scavenged old scrap and metals that had survived the harsh climate, and found strange minerals that seemed to resonate with the ship's circuits. Leora observed silently, letting him make discoveries on his own and only guiding when necessary. Their teamwork grew stronger with each passing hour. Ethan's skill and ingenuity complemented Leora's ancient knowledge, and slowly the ship's systems began to stabilize. The shields glimmered faintly, the engines hummed with a steady pulse, and the energy core flickered in rhythm with Aetherion's breath. One evening, as the twin moons rose over the horizon, Leora finally shared more of her secret. She spoke of the interdimensional conflict the Empire was waging and how entire worlds had fallen to their power. The heart of Elindra had chosen her as its guardian, and she carried the burden of protecting it from those who sought to use it for conquest. The ship itself was designed to traverse realms, and had hidden capabilities that even Leora had not fully explored. Ethan listened with a mixture of awe and fear, realizing that the quiet nights of repair were only the beginning of a much larger adventure. One night, while Ethan adjusted the energy conduits, Aetherion suddenly tensed and the ship pulsed with a brighter light. A faint signal appeared on the instruments showing movement far beyond Myrath. The hunters were near. Even at this distance, Leora's expression grew tense, and she explained that their enemies had begun tracking her across the void. She told Ethan that they must be ready to leave at a moment's notice, and that every adjustment to the ship could be critical for survival. The next days were filled with careful preparation. Ethan learned to operate sections of the ship under Leora's guidance, and even began to anticipate the needs of the living circuits. Aetherion became both companion and warning system, sensing vibrations in the air and subtle shifts in energy that heralded danger. Despite the looming threat, there was a sense of camaraderie among the trio. Their trust in each other grew deeper than words, and the bond between human and elf and dragon became undeniable. Ethan realized that his loneliness on Myrath had ended and that he was now part of something vast and extraordinary. He found courage in their presence and purpose in their mission, and the desert nights no longer felt empty but charged with potential. The final morning before they planned to depart, the ship shone with a steady light, like a heartbeat. Leora and Aetherion stood near Ethan, observing him as he made the last adjustments. Every connection tested, every panel checked, and every energy pulse calibrated. There was anticipation and tension in the air, yet also a quiet triumph for the progress they had made together. As the first rays of sunlight spread across the dunes, Ethan felt a surge of determination. They were ready to face whatever came next in the vastness of space and beyond, for the war that Leora fled was not over, and the arrival of unknown forces would test them as never before. Yet with courage, knowledge, and the bond they shared, they were prepared to embark on a journey that would stretch across stars and through dimensions, with the hope that the heart of Elindra would remain safe in the hands of its true guardian. As the morning sun rose over the dunes, Ethan Core worked alongside Leora, making final adjustments to the ship. Every movement deliberate, every connection checked. Aetherion observed with keen eyes, sensing tension in the wind. The desert was silent, except for the soft hum of the ship and the occasional gust of sand. Across the horizon, 3 dark shapes appeared, slowly emerging from the morning haze. They were unfamiliar cruisers, their design alien and imposing. Their presence filled the valley with a sense of dread and anticipation. Leora's eyes narrowed. She whispered to Ethan that these were the hunters, the forces that had pursued her across star systems. Her voice was calm, but held an undercurrent of urgency. The cruisers hovered above, the planes their shadow stretching across the dunes. Ethan felt his pulse quicken, knowing that any wrong move could spell disaster. Aetherion growled softly, its wings flexing as it prepared to react. The first cruiser touched down lightly, raising a plume of sand, while the other 2 followed methodically. Soldiers emerged from the shadows of the hulls, their armor glinting in the sunlight. They moved with precision, coordinated and cold. Their leader, a tall figure named Saris Valen, advanced toward them, his expression hard and eyes sharp. Like the others, he carried an air of authority that demanded obedience and fear. He called for Leora to surrender, claiming she had stolen sacred technology that belonged to his empire. Ethan stood, his ground, unwilling to hand over the elf and her dragon. Saris gestured to his soldiers to advance. Aetherion erupted in a wave of blue fire, the heat scorching the sand and throwing the soldiers off balance. The battle began with a chaos of light and sound energy weapons clashing against the mystic shields of the dragon and ship. Sparks flew as Ethan activated defense drones, his hands shaking, but his mind sharp with focus. The drones darted across the sand, firing bursts of energy that distracted, the attackers giving Leora and Aetherion the advantage. The enemy was relentless, yet the combination of human ingenuity, elven technology, and the dragon's power held them at bay. Leora channeled energy from the ship into protective fields around them, while Aetherion moved with grace, striking precise targets with bursts of fire and claw. The desert became a battlefield of swirling light and heat. Ethan felt fear and adrenaline in equal measure, working tirelessly to maintain the integrity of the ship's systems. He had never imagined himself in such a situation yet. His mind adapted quickly, finding solutions and adjusting defenses as needed. Despite the chaos, a bond of trust strengthened among them. They communicated without words, Leora guiding the ship's core, Ethan managing the defense drones and Aetherion controlling the field with raw power. It was a dance of survival and strategy that kept them alive. The soldiers regrouped and advanced again. Their leader, Ceres, attempted to breach the shields directly using advanced weapons that burned through metal and sand. Leora raised her hands, directing energy from the ship and from her own being. A surge of light exploded outward, forcing the attackers back temporarily. Ethan seized the moment, repairing a critical link in the ship's energy core, preventing a complete shutdown. The battle raged with no clear victor, yet slowly the trio gained ground, their unity stronger than the enemy's numbers. Each move they made was calculated, anticipating the enemy's next action. The heat of the battle, mixed with the rising sun, created mirages in the desert, making it hard to distinguish between illusion and reality. Aetherion's flames reflected off the ship and sand, creating a spectacle of light and shadow. Ethan's mind focused on the mechanics, the repairs, and energy channels, keeping them one step ahead of destruction. The sound of engines roared as Ceres signaled the cruisers to retreat slightly, regrouping to reassess. Their attack, Leora took a moment to scan the environment, discovering hidden weaknesses in their formation, and signaling Ethan to prepare a countermeasure. He rerouted power to the ship's main systems, enhancing the shields and stabilizing the organic circuits. Aetherion flared its wings, releasing another wave of fire and light, forcing the enemy to scatter further. The desert settled momentarily as the smoke and heat lingered in the air. Ethan took a deep breath, looking at Leora and Aetherion, feeling the weight of what they had survived. He realized that the arrival of the cruisers had been a turning point, not only in their immediate struggle, but in the larger conflict that awaited beyond the dunes. The sun climbed higher, revealing the tracks of the cruisers as they departed, slowly leaving a warning that they would return with greater force. Ethan and Leora knew that the next confrontation could not be avoided. The repairs on the ship were critical, the bond with Aetherion essential, and their combined courage necessary to face the enemies who would not relent. The day passed with tension and quiet reflection as they prepared for departure. The desert plains no longer felt empty, but alive with memories of battle and the knowledge of what was to come. Ethan understood that he was no longer alone. His actions had consequences, and his courage had earned him a place among beings far beyond his previous understanding. The arrival of the cruisers had tested their limits, yet strengthened their resolve. Every moment spent on repairs, every act of bravery and trust had brought them to this point, ready to face the challenges across the stars and protect the heart of Alindra from falling into the wrong hands. The trio stood together on the dunes, looking toward the horizon, knowing that their journey was only beginning and that the coming battles would demand all of their skill, strength, and unity. Ethan Core gripped the controls of the ship as Leora stood beside him. Guiding the navigation, Aetherion hovered close, the metallic scales glinting in the faint light from the living ship. Their departure from Myrath had been narrow, and the desert, left behind, now seemed like a distant memory. Yet the danger was far from over. The ship hummed softly beneath their hands, responding to their combined will as it rose above the dunes and into the thinning atmosphere. Beyond the horizon, stars spread out in glittering arrays, reminding Ethan of how small and fragile their current safety was. They traveled through the void with a cautious hope, knowing the enemy would not abandon the pursuit. Ceres Valen and his fleet would come again, and they needed to be prepared. Leora explained that the ship could traverse more than space. It could manipulate the very fabric between dimensions, allowing them to hide among nebulae and fracture points unknown to most civilizations. Ethan studied the controls with care, absorbing the lessons from Leora and experimenting cautiously. The circuits responded to his touch, and he felt a connection forming, as though the ship recognized him as part of their trio. Aetherion remained vigilant, sensing fluctuations in the energy of surrounding space. Leora relied on the dragon's instincts as much as her own wisdom, guiding them toward hidden paths that would allow them to elude detection for a while. They reached a fractured starway, a corridor of light and darkness weaving across the void. Leora explained that this was a dangerous but necessary route, leading to a hidden nebula, where they could regroup and assess their situation. Ethan marveled at the beauty of the corridor as stars reflected off. The ship's hull and tiny asteroids passed by, brushing the edges of their vision. The silence of space contrasted sharply with the tension in their minds, as each knew the enemy could strike at any moment. Once inside the nebula, the ship glowed with a soft light as Leora manipulated the energy channels, stabilizing the environment. It was a refuge among chaos, a place where they could plan and prepare for the counterstrike. Ethan helped reroute power, boosting the shields and reinforcing the ship's energy matrix. They discussed strategies and learned more of each other's strengths and weaknesses, forming a trust that went beyond words. Leora revealed that the fleet of Ceres Valen was vast and well-equipped, yet they could be outmaneuvered. By using the terrain of space itself and the hidden capabilities of the living ship, Ethan suggested adjustments to the energy pulse timing, which would enhance the shields and improve evasion techniques. Leora smiled faintly, recognizing his ingenuity. Etherian added its own insight through subtle movements and vibrations that indicated energy flows and potential threats. The days inside the nebula passed in preparation and observation. Ethan learned to read the ship and dragon as extensions. Of his own senses, Leora shared knowledge about the history of her people, the wars they had fought and the sacrifices made to protect the heart of Elindra. Their bond deepened as they shared stories in quiet moments. Etherian became more than a guardian. It became a link connecting human and elf through trust and mutual respect. Yet the shadow of the enemy loomed over them periodically. Small scout vessels appeared only to vanish through the dense fog of the nebula. Leora explained these were probes, and that the main fleet would follow soon. They needed a plan to confront the inevitable attack and protect not just themselves, but the secret fleet of refugees she had located. Ethan worked tirelessly with Leora, combining human engineering with ancient elven technology, creating a hybrid weapon system capable of disrupting the enemy's warp fields and disabling ships temporarily without causing mass destruction. Etherian assisted in testing energy pulses and stabilizing power flows. The work was exhausting yet rewarding, as each improvement gave them a slight edge over the approaching forces. One night, as the twin moons of a nearby planet reflected faint light through the nebula, Ethan realized the gravity of their situation. They were on the edge of space, unknown and fragile, yet determined to fight for survival and for the safety of countless lives. The bond between them had become unbreakable. They were not just allies but companions united by purpose and circumstance. Leora revealed the heart of Elindra was awakening within her, subtly influencing the ship and the surrounding space. It pulsed with energy, responding to her emotions and intentions. Ethan understood that its power was immense yet delicate, requiring trust and harmony to control. Etherian flared its wings as if sensing the growing energy, and pressed close to Leora for protection and guidance. The plan for the counterstrike took shape. Ethan would operate the hybrid systems while Leora channeled her energy into the ship, amplifying shields and weapons. Etherian would use its natural abilities to control the battlefield and create openings for precise attacks. They practiced maneuvers weaving through asteroid fields and energy currents, the ship responding smoothly as if alive. Their coordination was tested repeatedly, ensuring that when the enemy arrived, they would function as a single unit capable of outsmarting larger forces. As the first signs of Ceres Valen's fleet appeared at the edge of the nebula, the trio prepared with confidence. They had used the time wisely, strengthened the ship, learned its limits, and harnessed the growing power within Leora. The calm before the storm was filled with focus and silent determination. The nebula shimmered with potential energy, and the trio waited, knowing the next hours could determine the course of the war. The living ship pulsed in harmony with their minds and hearts, creating a bond that would guide them through the coming battle and beyond, into the unknown reaches of space where courage, wisdom, and unity would be the only means of survival and victory. The nebula glowed softly around the living ship as Ethan Core tightened his grip on the controls. Leora stood beside him, her hands hovering over the energy panels. Etherian flexed its wings, ready to act. Their preparation was complete, and the first signals of Ceres Valen's fleet appeared on the scanners. The enemy was vast, numerous, and relentless, yet the trio remained calm and focused. The ship pulsed with life, responding to their combined will as they prepared to execute their counterstrike. Leora's connection to the heart of Alindra grew stronger each moment, the crystal within her radiating light and power. Ethan felt the energy reverberate through the ship as he coordinated the hybrid weapon systems, blending human ingenuity with elven technology. The fleet approached cautiously, unaware of the traps and maneuvers that awaited them. Aetherian stretched its wings, releasing a surge of fire and light that rippled through the surrounding space, disorienting the enemy's sensors. Leora directed energy pulses from the ship, amplifying the effect, creating a barrier of light and force that funneled the attackers into designated paths. Ethan activated the hybrid systems, sending bursts of energy through the corridors of the nebula, temporarily disabling engines and shields of the incoming ships. The enemy faltered, struggling to adapt to the unfamiliar tactics. The living ship and the dragon worked in perfect unison, guiding the enemy into vulnerable positions. The first cruiser fell into a carefully prepared trap, a concentrated burst of energy collapsing its warp drive, leaving it stranded and incapacitated. The following ships attempted to regroup, yet each move was anticipated. Leora's understanding of the battlefield, combined with Ethan's adjustments and Aetherian's raw power, created a harmony that outmatched the numerical advantage of the enemy. The battle escalated with bursts of fire and light weaving through the nebula, creating a spectacle of energy and skill. Ethan remained focused, his hands steady on the controls, rerouting power when necessary, and repairing any damage as it occurred. Leora channeled more of the heart's energy into the shields, strengthening them and amplifying the offensive capabilities of the ship. The dragon moved like a shadow through space, striking precisely at key targets. The enemy commander, Saris Valen, realized his forces were being outmaneuvered and signaled a retreat, yet the corridor of energy had closed behind them, forcing a final confrontation. A surge of power emanated from Leora and the ship, sending waves through the fleet, destabilizing ships and forcing them into surrender or destruction. Ethan activated the last series of hybrid pulses, creating a network of energy that disabled the cruisers without causing unnecessary destruction. The battlefield fell silent. The nebula shimmered with residual energy, and the calm after the storm brought relief and exhaustion. Leora looked at Ethan and Aetherian, her face reflecting both triumph and weariness. The heart of Alindra glowed softly within her, acknowledging the success and the protection of its power. The refugees and hidden fleets emerged from the shadows of the nebula, moving cautiously as the threat had been neutralized. Ethan felt the weight of what they had achieved, realizing that their courage and unity had saved countless lives across realms. Aetherian pressed close to Leora, its metallic scales warm against her energy pulses and Ethan's presence. The bond between them stronger than ever. Leora spoke softly, thanking Ethan for his courage and his humanity, acknowledging that without him their victory would not have been possible. The ship pulsed rhythmically, responding to their collective will, a living testament to their combined effort and trust. They had survived the relentless pursuit, faced overwhelming odds, and protected the heart of Alindra from falling into the wrong hands. Ethan realized that the universe was larger and more complex than he had ever imagined, yet in the midst of chaos and danger, he had found purpose and companionship. The trio stayed within the nebula for a time, monitoring the fleeing enemy and ensuring the safety of the hidden fleets. They repaired minor damages and strengthened the ship for future journeys, knowing that the war may continue. Yet their bond would carry them through. Leora shared visions of future challenges and the role they would play in safeguarding multiple worlds. Ethan listened and learned, understanding that courage, knowledge, and unity were more powerful than any weapon alone. Aetherian lay beside them, absorbing energy from the ship and the heart of Alindra, forming a triad of life, strength, and protection. Together, they had become a force beyond ordinary comprehension, a symbol of hope in the darkness of interstellar war. The nebula slowly faded behind them as they set course for new systems. Ethan felt a sense of peace amidst the stars, knowing that though the journey ahead would be fraught with danger, they were ready. Leora, Ethan, and Aetherian had faced despair and emerged victorious, stronger and united. Their story would become a legend across the cosmos, a tale of courage, humanity, and the enduring power of trust and companionship as they continued to guard the heart of Alindra and protect the fragile balance between worlds. The stars stretched endlessly before them, each one a reminder of the vastness of space and the importance of the choices they had made. In this moment, they were not alone. They were a team, a family bound by destiny and purpose, ready to face the unknown with unwavering resolve, and the last light of Elindra glowing softly within and around them.